Captain Maria Santos had always been different from the other pilots at Fort Campbell. While her fellow aviators spent their downtime playing cards or working out, she could be found in the maintenance hangar, sleeves rolled up, helping the mechanics understand every bolt and wire in her AH-64 Apache helicopter. Her laugh was legendary on the base, a rich musical sound that could cut through the noise of rotor blades and diesel generators. It was the kind of laugh that made people smile even when they were having the worst day of their lives. Maria came from a long line of warriors. Her great-grandfather had fought alongside Pancho Villa in Mexico. Her grandfather served in World War II with the 36th Infantry Division. Her father flew Hueys in Vietnam, and her older brother was currently deployed with the Marines in Afghanistan. But Maria was the first woman in her family to take to the skies, and she wore that responsibility like armor. She had earned her wings through sheer determination and skill that left her instructors speechless. During advanced combat training, she had executed maneuvers that seasoned pilots thought were impossible. Her ability to thread an Apache through mountain valleys at night using only night vision goggles had become the stuff of legend. More importantly, she had an almost supernatural ability to bring her crew home safely. The Apache helicopter she flew wasn't just a machine to Maria, it was an extension of her will. The AH-64 Apache Longbow was one of the most sophisticated attack helicopters ever built. With its twin General Electric engines, advanced targeting systems, and ability to carry Hellfire missiles and a 30mm chain gun, it was a formidable weapon of war. But in Maria's hands, it became something more, a protector, a guardian angel for ground troops who found themselves in impossible situations. Her call sign was Laughing Wolf, earned during her first combat deployment in Iraq. She had been providing close air support for a convoy that had been ambushed in a narrow canyon. The situation was desperate. Enemy fighters had the high ground, and American soldiers were pinned down with nowhere to run. As Maria brought her Apache in low, taking heavy fire from all directions, her voice came over the radio, calm and steady, punctuated by that distinctive laugh. "Don't worry, boys," she had said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Mama Wolf is here to clean house." And then came the laugh, not manic or nervous, but confident and reassuring. Within minutes, she had neutralized the threat and cleared the path for the convoy to escape. Not a single American soldier was lost that day. That was 3 years ago. Now, Maria was facing her most challenging assignment yet. Intelligence reports had identified a high-value target deep in hostile territory, a weapons cache that was supplying insurgent forces throughout the region. The cache was located in a narrow mountain valley, surrounded by rocky peaks that rose like jagged teeth into the sky. Getting in would be difficult, getting out alive would be nearly impossible. The mission briefing had been held in a dimly lit room at the forward operating base. Colonel Jackson, a grizzled veteran with more combat hours than most pilots had total flight time, had laid out the details with military precision. The target was located in what intelligence called the box, a valley so narrow and surrounded by such high terrain that it created a natural trap for aircraft. The valley is approximately 2 kilometers long and only 800 meters wide at its widest point, Colonel Jackson had explained, pointing to satellite imagery projected on the wall. The peaks on either side rise to over 3,000 meters. There are known anti-aircraft positions on the ridgelines, including shoulder-fired missiles and heavy machine guns. Maria studied the images carefully, her mind already calculating approach angles, escape routes, and tactical considerations. She could see why this mission had been assigned to her. Getting into the box would require precision flying that few pilots possessed. More critically, getting out would require the kind of split-second decision-making and tactical awareness that had made her legendary among her peers. "What's our intelligence on enemy strength?" asked Captain Rodriguez, Maria's wingman and co-pilot. He was a solid pilot, reliable and steady, but he lacked Maria's instinctive understanding of combat flying. "Estimated 40 to 60 fighters," the colonel replied. They've had months to prepare defensive positions. They know we're coming. It's just a matter of when. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just a dangerous mission. It was potentially a suicide mission. The enemy would have every advantage: high ground, prepared positions, and the ability to concentrate their fire on a narrow approach corridor. Maria leaned back in her chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Sir, what's the timeline for mission execution?" "Dawn, tomorrow. You'll have a brief window when the morning mist provides some concealment, but once the sun burns it off, you'll be completely exposed." "And backup?" Colonel Jackson's expression grew even more serious. "There won't be any. This is a precision strike mission. Get in, destroy the cache, get out. No cavalry is coming if things go wrong." After the briefing, Maria walked out into the cool desert night. Above her, stars filled the sky in a way that was impossible to see back home in the States. She thought about her family, about the long line of warriors who had come before her. Each of them had faced moments like this, moments when duty demanded everything, and the only choice was to step forward into the unknown. She found Rodriguez sitting on some sandbags, staring up at the same stars. "You thinking about tomorrow?" she asked, settling down beside him. "Can't help it," he replied. "That valley? It's a death trap, Maria. There's no way we make it out of there if things go bad." Maria was quiet for a moment, listening to the distant sound of generators and the occasional radio chatter from the operations center. "You know what my grandfather told me before I left for flight school?" she asked finally. Rodriguez shook his head. "He said that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway. He said that every warrior in our family had faced that choice, to step forward when everything inside you is screaming to run the other way." "And what did you tell him?" Maria's laugh drifted across the base, that same rich, musical sound that had become her trademark. "I told him I'd rather die laughing than live crying." The next morning came too soon. Maria performed her pre-flight inspection with the methodical precision that had kept her alive through dozens of combat missions. Every system was checked and double-checked. Every weapon was tested and verified. The Apache responded to her touch like a well-trained horse, eager and ready for the fight ahead. As she strapped herself into the pilot's seat, Maria felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before combat. Her hands moved automatically across the controls, bringing the massive helicopter to life. The twin turboshaft engines spooled up with a growing whine, and the four-blade main rotor began its lazy rotation that would soon become a blur of deadly efficiency. Rodriguez settled into his seat beside her, running through his own checklist. As the co-pilot and gunner, he would be responsible for managing the Apache's weapon systems while Maria focused on flying. They had trained together for months, developing the kind of seamless coordination that was essential for survival in combat. "All systems green," Rodriguez reported over the intercom. "Roger that," Maria replied, her voice steady and professional. "Tower, this is Laughing Wolf requesting permission for takeoff." "Laughing Wolf, you are cleared for takeoff. Wind is calm, visibility unlimited." "Good hunting." Maria pulled collective, adding power to the massive rotor system overhead. The Apache lifted off the ground with the smooth confidence of a machine built for war. As they climbed away from the base, Maria could see the first rays of sunlight beginning to paint the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. The flight to the target area would take 45 minutes, following a route that had been carefully planned to avoid known enemy positions. They would fly low, using the terrain to mask their approach, until they reached the entrance to the box. Then there would be no hiding, no tactical advantage except speed and surprise. As they flew through the pre-dawn darkness, Maria found herself thinking about all the missions that had brought her to this moment. the convoy ambush in Iraq where she had earned her call sign, the rescue mission in Syria where she had extracted a downed pilot under heavy fire, the countless close air support missions where her presence had meant the difference between life and death for American soldiers on the ground. Each mission had taught her something new about the delicate balance between aggression and precision that made a great combat pilot. She had learned that in the heat of battle, there was no room for hesitation or doubt. Success came from training, preparation, and the absolute confidence that you could accomplish the impossible. The Apache's navigation system showed they were approaching the initial point, the last checkpoint before entering enemy territory. From here, they would be on their own, flying into the heart of a well-defended position with nothing but their skill and courage to see them through. IP in sight, Rodriguez announced, beginning final approach checklist. Maria felt her pulse quicken as they entered the final phase of their approach. This was the moment when months of planning and preparation would be tested against the brutal reality of combat. She thought about the ground troops who were depending on this mission's success, about the American soldiers who would live or die based on whether she could destroy that weapons cache. The entrance to the box appeared ahead of them, a narrow gap between towering peaks that seemed to close in on itself like the jaws of some enormous predator. Maria could see the early morning mist that Colonel Jackson had mentioned, a thin layer of white vapor that clung to the valley floor like a burial shroud. "Entering the box in 30 seconds, she announced over the radio. There would be no turning back now. Whatever was waiting for them in that narrow valley, they would face it together. Maria's hands were steady on the controls, her mind focused and clear. This was what she had trained for, what she had been born for. As they crossed the threshold into enemy territory, Maria Santos, call sign Laughing Wolf, prepared to face the greatest challenge of her military career. The narrow walls of the box closed in around Maria's Apache like the mouth of a stone giant. The morning mist that intelligence had promised was there, but thinner than expected, offering only scattered pockets of concealment as she flew deeper into the valley. Through her night vision goggles, the rocky walls appeared in ghostly green detail, revealing hidden caves and defensive positions that hadn't shown up in the satellite imagery. "Contact! 12 o'clock high," Rodriguez called out, his voice tight with tension. "Muzzle flash on the north ridge." Before he could finish the sentence, tracer rounds began streaming past the Apache's cockpit. The enemy had been waiting, just as Colonel Jackson had predicted. Maria banked hard left, dropping the helicopter closer to the valley floor as bullets cracked through the air where they had been flying moments before. "Beginning defensive maneuvers," she announced calmly over the radio, her voice carrying that unmistakable note of confidence that had become her trademark. Even as chaos erupted around them, there was something in her tone that suggested she was exactly where she belonged. The weapons cache was supposed to be located at the far end of the valley, nestled against the base of the eastern wall where trucks could access it through a hidden mountain pass. But as Maria flew deeper into the box, she began to realize that something was very wrong with their intelligence. The defensive positions weren't random. They were too well coordinated, too perfectly positioned to create overlapping fields of fire. "Rodriguez, you seeing what I'm seeing?" she asked, pulling the Apache into a steep climb to avoid a shoulder-fired missile that streaked past their tail rotor. "Yeah, this isn't just a weapons cache. This is a full-scale ambush." More muzzle flashes erupted from positions on both sides of the valley. Heavy machine gun fire raked across their flight path, and Maria could hear the distinctive pop, pop, pop of rounds striking the Apache's armored hull. The helicopter was built to take punishment, but even the mighty Apache had its limits. "Base, this is Laughing Wolf," Maria transmitted. "We've got multiple enemy positions, heavily fortified. Recommend we abort and reassess." The radio crackled with static for several seconds before Colonel Jackson's voice came through. "Negative, Laughing Wolf. Mission is a go. Destroy the target and return to base." Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the thin mountain air. Something in the colonel's voice was different, too controlled, too rehearsed. She had worked with Jackson for 2 years, and she knew when he was lying. "Sir, request confirmation of abort authority," she pressed. "Laughing Wolf, you are to proceed to target and complete your mission. That's a direct order." Rodriguez looked over at her, his face pale behind his helmet visor. They both understood what was happening now. This wasn't just a mission to destroy a weapons cache. It was something else entirely. But what? Another missile streaked past the cockpit, close enough that Maria could feel the heat through the armored glass. She rolled the Apache inverted and pulled through a diving turn that brought them down to barely 50 feet above the rocky valley floor. At this altitude, the enemy positions on the ridgelines couldn't depress their weapons low enough to target them effectively. "Target in sight," Rodriguez announced. 11 o'clock. Approximately 1 click. Maria could see it now. A cluster of buildings and vehicles at the end of the valley, exactly where intelligence had said it would be. But even from this distance, something looked wrong. The buildings were too neat, too organized, and there were too many vehicles for a simple weapons cache. As they got closer, the truth became clear. This wasn't a weapons cache at all. It was a command center, complete with communication antennas, armored vehicles, and what looked like a small army of well-trained fighters. And sitting right in the middle of it all was something that made Maria's blood run cold. A mobile surface-to-air missile launcher, its radar dish already tracking their approach. "Rodriguez, tell me you're seeing this," she said, her voice still steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. "I see it. Maria, we need to get out of here, now." But as Maria began to turn the Apache around, she realized they had another problem. The entrance to the valley, their only escape route, was now blocked by a curtain of tracer fire from positions that hadn't been active when they flew in. The enemy had let them enter the box, and now they were sealing the trap. "Base, this is Laughing Wolf," she transmitted. "We're trapped in the box. Enemy has deployed SAM systems and blocked our exit. Request immediate support." The response came back cold and emotionless. "Laughing Wolf, complete your mission. Destroy the target." That's when Maria understood the full scope of what was happening. This wasn't a mission to destroy a weapons cache. It was a mission to eliminate her. Someone had fed false intelligence, someone had sent them into a trap, and someone was now ordering them to their deaths. But why? Maria had always prided herself on being a soldier's soldier, loyal to her country, dedicated to her mission, protective of her fellow warriors. She had never questioned orders, never caused political problems, never done anything that would make her a target for elimination. Then it hit her. 3 months ago, during a routine maintenance inspection, she had discovered something unusual in her Apache's computer systems, unauthorized modifications to the flight data recorder and communication systems. When she had reported it to base security, she had been told it was a software upgrade and to forget about it. But Maria's mechanical aptitude had told her otherwise. Someone had been recording everything, every mission, every communication, every tactical decision she made. The pieces began falling into place. Her legendary flying ability, her tactical innovations, her training methods. Someone had been studying her, learning from her, and now they wanted her eliminated before she could realize what was happening. "Rodriguez," she said quietly over the intercom, "I think we've been set up." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Perfect intelligence on our target, but no mention of the SAM systems or the size of the defensive force. Orders to proceed despite obvious tactical problems. And now they're refusing to send support even though we're clearly outgunned and outnumbered." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment as another burst of machine gun fire rattled off their armor plating. "You think someone wants us dead?" I think someone has been using us, and now we know too much. The mobile SAM launcher was rotating to track their movement now, its radar lock-on tone screaming through their defensive systems. Maria had perhaps 30 seconds before it would fire, and at this range, even her legendary flying skills wouldn't be enough to evade a heat-seeking missile. But Maria Santos hadn't survived 3 combat deployments by giving up when things looked impossible. She had earned her reputation by finding solutions where others saw only death sentences. And right now, she was looking at the narrow valley walls rising around them, calculating angles and distances with the precision of a mathematician and the instincts of a born predator. Rodriguez, how much ordnance are we carrying? Full load, 16 Hellfire missiles and well on 200 rounds of 30 millimeter. And what's our fuel status? 60%. Enough to get home if we had somewhere to go. Maria's laugh echoed through the cockpit, that same rich, confident sound that had become her calling card. But this time, there was something different about it, something darker and more determined. Then let's give these people a show they'll never forget. She pulled the Apache into a climbing turn that brought them face to face with the SAM launcher. Instead of trying to evade or escape, she was flying directly toward the most dangerous threat in the valley. It was a move so unexpected, so seemingly suicidal, that even the enemy gunners hesitated for a crucial second. "Target lock," Rodriguez announced, his voice suddenly sharp with professional focus. "Hellfire away!" The missile streaked from beneath the Apache's stub wing, its exhaust trail drawing a straight line between the helicopter and the SAM launcher. The enemy crew tried to traverse their system to track the incoming missile, but it was too late. The Hellfire struck the launcher squarely in its radar dish, and the entire system disappeared in a ball of flame and debris. But destroying the SAM system had cost them their element of surprise. Now every gun in the valley was turning toward them, and Maria could see more missiles being prepared at secondary positions she hadn't spotted before. "We've got company," Rodriguez warned, as 2 shoulder-fired missiles streaked up from concealed positions on the valley floor. Maria rolled the Apache hard left, pulling G-forces that pushed both pilots deep into their seats. The first missile flashed past their rotor disc, but the second one was tracking true. At the last possible second, she reversed the turn and dove toward the valley floor, using the Apache's own exhaust to confuse the missile's heat-seeking guidance system. The missile detonated 50 feet behind them, close enough to rattle their teeth but not close enough to bring them down. Maria leveled off barely 20 feet above the rocky ground, flying between boulders the size of houses as bullets and rocket-propelled grenades exploded all around them. "Base, this is Laughing Wolf," she transmitted, her voice calm and professional despite the hell they were flying through. "Mission parameters have changed. Target is not a weapons cache. Repeat, target is a major enemy command center with significant anti-aircraft assets. We are engaging with all available ordnance." The response came back immediately. "Laughing Wolf, you are ordered to abort mission and return to base immediately." Maria's laugh came over the radio again, but this time it carried an edge of defiance that made Rodriguez shiver. "Negative, base. We came here to do a job and we're going to finish it." She could almost hear the panic in Colonel Jackson's voice when he responded. "Laughing Wolf, that's a direct order. Abort mission now." "Sir, with all due respect," Maria replied, pulling the Apache into a rocket-assisted climb that brought them above the valley floor. "I'm a little busy right now saving American lives. Laughing Wolf out." And with that, she switched off the radio, cutting all communication with base. Whatever game was being played, whoever was pulling the strings, Maria Santos had just declared her independence. From this moment on, she would follow only her own conscience and her own understanding of what was right. But cutting communication also meant cutting off any possibility of rescue or support. They were now completely on their own, in a valley full of enemies, with limited ammunition and no way out, except through the gauntlet of defensive positions that had already proven they could coordinate their fire effectively. Rodriguez looked over at her with something approaching awe. "Maria, you realize what you just did?" "Yeah," she replied, lining up another target in her sights. "I just became a free agent." With the radio now silent, Maria felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in her military career, she was fighting on her own terms, answerable only to her own conscience and the oath she had taken to defend her country. Whatever conspiracy had led them into this trap, whatever corruption had infiltrated the chain of command, it ended here in this narrow valley where honor would be decided by courage rather than politics. The enemy command center sprawled across the far end of the box like a small fortress. Maria could see dozens of vehicles, temporary buildings, communication arrays, and what appeared to be senior officers directing the battle from an elevated command post. This wasn't just a weapons cache. It was the nerve center for enemy operations across the entire region. "Rodriguez, I count at least 40 targets of military significance," she said, her voice carrying the calm precision of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. "We're going to hit them hard and fast, then find our own way out of this valley." Maria, "We don't have enough ammunition for 40 targets," Rodriguez replied, his hands already working to prioritize threats on the Apache's targeting system. "And even if we did, we still have to deal with all those defensive positions on the ridge lines." Maria's laugh filled the cockpit again, but now it carried something new, not just confidence, but a kind of wild joy that came from finally being free to fight the way she had always known she should. "Rodriguez, my friend, you're thinking like a conventional pilot. We're not going to fight our way out of this valley. We're going to fly out of it." Before he could ask what she meant, Maria dove the Apache toward the valley floor, skimming so low that their rotor wash kicked up clouds of dust and debris. At this altitude, most of the ridgeline positions couldn't target them effectively, and the remaining defenders on the valley floor found themselves caught between the Apache's devastating firepower and their own command structure's desperate attempts to coordinate a defense. "Target lock, command post," Rodriguez announced. "Hellfire away." The missiles struck the elevated platform where enemy officers had been coordinating the defense, eliminating the command structure in a single devastating blow. Immediately, Maria could see the difference in the enemy's response. Less coordination, more panic, individual positions firing wildly rather than concentrating their efforts. But destroying the command post had also revealed the true scope of what they were facing. As the dust cleared, Maria could see that the enemy force was even larger than she had initially estimated. There were at least 200 fighters spread throughout the valley, along with armored vehicles, anti-aircraft guns, and multiple rocket launchers. "Jesus, Maria," Rodriguez breathed. "This isn't just a command center. It's a staging area for a major offensive." "Which is exactly why we can't let them keep it," Maria replied, pulling the Apache into a climbing turn that brought them face to face with a pair of enemy trucks mounted with heavy machine guns. "These people were planning something big, and now we're the only ones who can stop it." The next 20 minutes became a blur of controlled violence as Maria flew the Apache through a series of attack runs that pushed both the helicopter and its crew to their absolute limits. She used the narrow valley walls like a fighter pilot would use buildings in an urban environment, diving between rocky outcroppings and using the terrain to mask her approach until she was close enough to engage targets with devastating precision. Rodriguez proved to be the perfect partner for this kind of flying. His ability to acquire and engage targets while Maria focused on keeping them alive was nothing short of remarkable. Together, they destroyed vehicles, ammunition dumps, and defensive positions with a efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. But the Apache was taking damage. Small arms fire had shattered several of the cockpit windows, and Maria could feel the helicopter's response becoming sluggish as hydraulic fluid leaked from damaged systems. Warning lights were beginning to illuminate across the instrument panel, and the engine temperature gauges were climbing toward the red line. "Maria, we need to get out of here," Rodriguez said, his voice tight with concern. "We're running low on everything: fuel, ammunition, and luck." "Just a few more targets," she replied, lining up another attack run on a cluster of vehicles that were trying to escape through the mountain pass. "We can't let them regroup somewhere else." But as she dove toward the fleeing vehicles, a new threat appeared on the ridge line above them. A second SAM launcher had emerged from a concealed position, and its radar was already tracking their approach. At this range and altitude, there would be no time to evade, no clever maneuver that could save them from a direct hit. "SAM launch!" Rodriguez shouted. "Brake left! Brake left!" Maria threw the Apache into the hardest turn the damaged helicopter could manage. But she could see immediately that it wouldn't be enough. The missile was tracking true, its guidance system locked onto the Apache's heat signature with deadly precision. In perhaps 10 seconds, their mission would end in a ball of fire and twisted metal. That's when Maria Santos made the decision that would define her legacy. Instead of trying to evade the missile, she turned the Apache directly toward the SAM launcher and pushed the throttles to maximum power. The helicopter leaped forward with a surge of acceleration that pressed both pilots back in their seats, racing toward the ridge line where the missile launcher sat like a mechanical predator waiting for its prey. "Maria, what are you doing?" Rodriguez asked, his voice filled with a combination of terror and admiration. "Something they'll never expect," she replied, her hands steady on the controls as the Apache climbed toward the rocky outcropping where their executioner waited. "Rodriguez, when I tell you, fire everything we have left at that launcher." The missile was closing fast now, its exhaust trail drawing a deadly line between the helicopter and certain death. Maria could see the enemy crew scrambling around their launcher, trying to understand why their target was flying directly toward them instead of trying to escape. "Now!" she shouted. Rodriguez triggered every remaining weapon on the Apache simultaneously. Hellfire missiles streaked from the stub wings, while the 30mm chain gun poured a stream of high-explosive rounds toward the SAM position. The combined firepower struck the ridgeline like the hammer of an angry god, turning rock and metal into a hurricane of destruction. But the enemy missile was still tracking, still closing, still committed to its deadly mission. Maria could see it in her peripheral vision now, a streak of white exhaust and malevolent purpose racing toward her helicopter with the inevitability of gravity. At the last possible second, Maria pulled the Apache into a vertical climb that brought them directly above the exploding SAM position. The enemy missile, programmed to track heat signatures, suddenly found itself faced with a much larger and more attractive target: the burning fuel and ammunition from the destroyed launcher. The missile detonated in the heart of the explosion below them, adding its own destructive power to the inferno that was consuming the enemy position. Maria felt the Apache shudder as the shock wave hit them, but the helicopter held together, its sturdy construction and her expert flying keeping them airborne despite damage that would have brought down a lesser pilot. But their problems were far from over. The Apache was now running on fumes, with warning lights illuminating every system Maria looked at. Hydraulic pressure was dropping, engine temperatures were climbing, and she could feel the aircraft becoming increasingly difficult to control. More critically, they were still trapped in the box with no apparent way out. The entrance to the valley was still blocked by defensive positions, and even if they could fight their way through, Maria wasn't sure the Apache would hold together long enough to reach friendly territory. That's when she noticed something that made her smile, despite their desperate situation. The explosion of the SAM launcher had done more than just eliminate the threat. It had also brought down a section of the ridgeline, creating a new gap in the valley wall that hadn't existed when they flew in. "Rodriguez, you see that opening at 2 o'clock?" He looked where she was pointing and his face lit up with understanding. "Maria, please tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking." "It's our only chance," she replied, turning the Apache toward the gap in the ridge line. "The question is whether we can climb fast enough to clear the rocks." The gap was narrow, perhaps 50 meters wide, and surrounded by jagged peaks that rose like stone daggers into the morning sky. Worse, the opening was at least 1,000 feet above their current altitude, and the Apache would have to climb through the gap while fighting both gravity and its own mechanical failures. But Maria had spent her entire career preparing for moments like this. Every training flight, every combat mission, every hour spent studying the Apache's capabilities had led to this single moment when everything would be decided by skill, courage, and the kind of determination that ran in her family's blood. She pulled back on the collective and pushed the throttles to maximum power, coaxing every last bit of performance from the damaged helicopter. The Apache responded sluggishly, its engines straining against the thin mountain air and the weight of battle damage that was slowly tearing the aircraft apart. As they climbed toward the gap, enemy fighters on the valley floor realized what was happening and concentrated their fire on the escaping helicopter. Bullets cracked through the air around them, and Maria could hear the distinctive sound of rounds striking the Apache's armor and rotor system. "Come on, baby," she whispered to the helicopter, her hands gentle on the controls despite the violence surrounding them. "Just a little more. Just get us home." The gap grew larger in the windscreen, but so did the rocky walls on either side. Maria could see now that it was going to be incredibly close. The Apache's rotor disc would clear the rocks by perhaps 10 feet on either side, with no margin for error and no opportunity for a second attempt. "Base, this is Laughing Wolf," she transmitted, switching the radio back on as they approached the gap. "If anyone is listening, we're coming home. Mission accomplished." Colonel Jackson's voice crackled through the static immediately. "Laughing Wolf, what's your status? We lost communication with you over an hour ago." Maria's laugh filled the radio frequency one last time, rich, musical, defiant, and filled with the joy of someone who had fought the impossible and won. "Sir, the target has been neutralized. Enemy command structure destroyed, staging area eliminated, and approximately 200 hostiles taken out of action." There was a long pause before Jackson responded, and when he did, his voice carried a mixture of amazement and something that might have been fear. "Laughing Wolf, how is that possible? Intelligence indicated minimal enemy presence." "Intelligence was wrong, sir," Maria replied, pulling the Apache through the gap with a precision that would have been impossible for any other pilot. But sometimes, wrong intelligence leads to right results. As they cleared the ridge line and found themselves flying over the open desert beyond the box, Maria felt a profound sense of completion. She had faced the trap that someone had set for her, fought her way through impossible odds, and emerged with proof that the enemy had been planning something much larger and more dangerous than anyone had suspected. But more than that, she had proven something to herself, that when everything else failed, when corruption and conspiracy threatened to destroy everything she believed in, she could still rely on her training, her courage, and that indomitable spirit that had made her family legendary. Rodriguez was laughing now, too. The release of tension and the joy of survival combining into something approaching hysteria. "Maria, I can't believe we made it out of there alive." "Rodriguez, my friend," she replied, setting course for home as the Apache limped through the desert sky. "We didn't just make it out alive, we won." Behind them, smoke continued to rise from the box, marking the end of an enemy operation that could have changed the course of the war. And ahead of them lay home, where Maria Santos, call sign Laughing Wolf, would have to explain how two people in one Apache helicopter had accomplished what an entire battalion would have struggled to achieve. But that was a problem for later. Right now, all that mattered was the steady beat of the Apache's rotors, the vast desert sky stretching endlessly ahead, and the knowledge that sometimes, when everything goes wrong, A warrior's laugh can echo through the radio waves and remind everyone listening that courage is stronger than conspiracy and honor is more powerful than fear.